Daniel Wright stood at the entrance of the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, his heart pounding in his chest. The massive crystal and metal structure towered above him, catching the light of two distant suns. He took a deep breath and adjusted. His plain blue uniform, feeling very much like what he was, the only human in the advanced quantum engineering program, the doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, dozens of alien students moved through the grand atrium. Some floated, others walked on multiple legs, and a few seemed to glide across the polished floor. But they all had one thing in common: the small silver device attached to the back of their heads or necks, neural links that connected their brains directly to the Academy's computers and to each other. Daniel touched the back of his own neck. Feeling only skin and hair, he had refused the neural implant, despite how much easier it would make his studies. His decision had shocked the Academy administrators, but they had reluctantly allowed it. Humans were new to the galactic community, after all, and some cultural accommodations were permitted. "Manual interface user approaching," said a voice, deliberately loud enough for Daniel to hear. Daniel looked up to see a tall, blue-skinned Arcturian student pointing at him. This was Zixler, already known throughout the Academy as a prodigy. 3 other alien students stood with him, their expressions ranging from amusement to disgust. "I thought the rumors were false," Zixler continued, his voice musical yet mocking. "A student attempting quantum engineering without a neural link? How will you even access the calculation matrices? The same way humans have done calculations." "For thousands of years," Daniel replied, trying to keep his voice steady, "with my brain." This caused a ripple of laughter among the gathering students. One of them, a green-scaled being named Krill, made a gesture with his 4 arms. "He'll be gone within a week," Krill said. "No human mind can process quantum variables quickly enough without assistance." Daniel felt his face grow hot but said nothing. He had heard these arguments before, back on Earth when he applied for the exchange program. Even other humans thought he was making a mistake by refusing augmentation. A gentle chime sounded throughout the atrium, indicating the start of orientation. The crowd of students began moving toward a large circular auditorium. Daniel followed, keeping his distance from Zixler's group. Inside the auditorium, a tall, elegant Centauran stood on the central platform. Professor Nethari was one of the most respected quantum physicists in the galaxy, with skin that shimmered like the night sky and eyes that seemed to contain their own light. "Welcome to the Advanced Quantum Engineering Program," Professor Nethari said, her voice resonating without the need for amplification. "You represent the finest minds from 27 galactic civilizations." Her gaze swept the room and paused briefly on Daniel. "This semester, you will undertake a project that will determine 80% of your grade. You will design, simulate, and theoretically construct a quantum entanglement stabilizer, capable of maintaining coherence across interstellar distances." A murmur of excitement spread through the room. Daniel quickly pulled out a small tablet and stylus to take notes, while around him, the other students simply blinked as they recorded the information directly through their neural links. "You may work in teams of up to 4, the professor continued. "Please register your teams by the end of today." As soon as she finished speaking, students began forming groups through their neural networks. Daniel watched as virtual messages passed between them, invisible to him but obvious from their reactions. Within minutes, everyone seemed to have found a team. Everyone except Daniel. Zixler's voice cut through the buzzing conversation. "Professor, what about the human? Should someone be required to accept him?" All eyes turned to Daniel. Professor Nethari considered for a moment before answering. "Mr. Wright has chosen a more challenging path by foregoing neural augmentation. As such, he may work alone if no team voluntarily includes him. This will be considered in his final evaluation." Daniel felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Working alone would be harder, but at least he wouldn't have to deal with teammates who thought he was inferior. As the orientation concluded, the students filed out, their neural links already buzzing with project ideas and calculations. Daniel remained in his seat, reviewing his notes and trying to ignore the occasional glances thrown his way. "Don't let them get to you," said a voice beside him. Daniel looked up to see a human woman in an administrator's uniform, her name badge. Read Vila Quinn? They laughed at the first Proximan who attended without gills too, she said with a small smile. Now half the aquatic buildings have air sections. Thanks, Daniel said. But a Proximan without gills can still breathe. I'm trying to compete in advanced quantum engineering using methods they consider prehistoric. Vila sat down next to him. My grandfather refused augmentation his entire career. He still developed 3 of the theories that made our first interstellar ships possible. Daniel raised his eyebrows, surprised. Dominic Quinn. He developed relative mass displacement theory? Vila nodded, pride evident in her eyes. The same. He always said that neural links create patterns in thinking. Everyone starts approaching problems the same way. Sometimes you need a different perspective. That's exactly why I refused the link, Daniel said, feeling a small surge of hope. There's research suggesting humans process information differently. Our brains make connections that might not follow logical patterns, but sometimes lead to breakthroughs. Well, you'll certainly get your chance to prove that theory, Vila said, standing up. The Academy Library has terminals that can be operated manually. I've made sure they're all functioning properly. I appreciate that, Daniel said. After she left, Daniel gathered his things and made his way to his assigned dormitory. The room was small but comfortable, adapted for human needs. He set up his workstation, arranging his tablet, portable computer, and several notebooks, actual paper notebooks he had brought from Earth, on his desk. He placed a small hologram of Dr. Samantha Oliver, his former professor who had encouraged him to maintain his human perspective at the Academy. Neural links are efficient, she had told him, but efficiency isn't always the path to discovery. Daniel looked out his window at the sprawling Academy campus. Somewhere out there, Zixler and the others were already beginning their projects, their thoughts flowing directly into complex simulations at the speed of thought. I'll show them what a human mind can do, he whispered to himself. He opened his notebook and began to write, the scratching of his pencil a small act of defiance. In a world of silent electronic thought. 2 weeks passed at the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences. Daniel Wright settled into a routine that looked nothing like the other students. While they spent most of their time in shared virtual workspaces, Daniel could be found in the physical laboratory, surrounded by diagrams and equations written on actual paper. The first project milestone was approaching fast, designing a quantum entanglement stabilizer. Daniel worked late into the night, his eyes red from lack of sleep. He struggled with the manual interface of the Academy's computers, inputting calculations that other students completed instantly through their neural links. 14 days in, and still using finger typing, said a voice that Daniel immediately recognized as Zixler S. The Arcturian stood at the doorway of the lab with his teammate Thaxos, a 6-limbed being with silver skin. Daniel looked up from his work. Did you need something, or just stopping by to mock me again? We finished our design an hour ago, Zixler said. Thaxos wanted to see the human who thinks he can compete without proper tools. Like watching someone try to build a starship with stone tools. Thaxos made a gurgling sound that Daniel assumed was laughter. Your species only achieved space travel a century ago. Perhaps you should have stayed on your planet until you evolved further. Daniel bit back an angry reply. Getting into arguments wouldn't help him finish his work. Thanks for the advice. I'll get back to my stone tools now. After they left, Daniel returned to his calculations. The standard approach to quantum entanglement involves stabilizing particles in a state of perfect balance. Every textbook, every lecture, every discussion on the subject agreed on this path. But Daniel kept hitting a wall with his simulations. There has to be another way, he muttered to himself. The next morning, Daniel received a message from Dr. Samantha Oliver, his former professor on Earth. Attached was a research paper titled, Neural Link Blind Spots in Creative Problem Solving, Thought. This might help, Dr. Oliver wrote. Remember, the neural links process information in patterns. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come from breaking those patterns. Daniel read through the paper with growing excitement. It described how neural links created consensus in thinking that sometimes prevented users from exploring unconventional solutions. The technology was so efficient at finding the best known path that it rarely ventured into truly unexplored territory. With renewed energy, Daniel turned back to his work. Instead of trying to stabilize the quantum particles in perfect balance, what if he deliberately introduced controlled instability? The idea seemed crazy, but he began sketching out a new approach. Late that evening, as Daniel worked through his new calculations, he felt someone watching him. He looked up to see a slender alien with pale purple skin and luminous eyes observing him from across the room. "I didn't mean to disturb you," she said in a soft voice. "I'm Ilara from the Proxima System, Daniel Wright, Earth." "I know who you are," Ilara said. "Everyone does." "The human who refuses neural augmentation," Daniel sighed. "Is this where you tell me I'm primitive too?" Ilara moved closer, her eyes fixed on Daniel's handwritten notes. "Actually, I'm curious about your methods. You're doing something different." "With the quantum alignment?" Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "I'm trying an approach that introduces controlled instability rather than perfect balance." "That contradicts every established model," Ilara said, but her tone held fascination rather than dismissal. "Exactly. But what if the established models are missing something? Neural links are programmed based on existing knowledge. They're great at optimizing known solutions, but might miss completely new approaches." Ilara was quiet for a moment. "May I?" she asked, gesturing to Daniel's notes. Daniel pushed them toward her, surprised by her interest. Ilara studied the equations, her expression thoughtful. "Your mathematics are unorthodox," she finally said. "But I see the potential logic. You're suggesting that quantum particles maintained in slight imbalance might actually form stronger entanglement bonds across distances." "That's the theory," Daniel said. "It goes against everything in the textbooks, but my early simulations show promise." Ilara seemed about to say more when the laboratory door opened and Dean Campbell walked in. As Earth's representative to the Academy, he regularly checked on Daniel's progress. "Mr. Wright," Dean Campbell said with a nod. "Working late again, I see." "Just trying to keep up, sir," Daniel replied. Dean Campbell looked at Ilara, who quickly stepped back from Daniel's workstation. "I was just leaving," she said, then turned to Daniel. "Thank you for sharing your insights." After she left, Dean Campbell examined Daniel's work. "The first milestone presentation is tomorrow. Are you prepared?" "I'll be ready," Daniel said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Good. Earth's position in the galactic community is still new and fragile. Your performance here matters, beyond your personal success." The pressure of those words stayed with Daniel as he worked through the night to complete his design. By morning, his eyes were bloodshot. But his simulation was ready. The presentation hall was filled with students and faculty when Daniel arrived. Zixler's team presented first, demonstrating their design with confidence and flair. Their quantum stabilizer showed excellent results in the standard testing scenarios. Earning approving nods from Professor Nethari, 3 more teams presented, all with similar approaches and similar results. When Daniel's turn came, he felt every eye in the room on him as he walked to the front with his tablet rather than transferring his presentation through a neural link. "Mr. Wright," Professor Nethari said, "please proceed." Daniel connected his tablet to the main display and began his presentation. "My approach differs from the standard model," he explained, showing his designs. "Instead of perfect balance, I've introduced controlled instability in the quantum alignment." A murmur ran through the audience. Professor Nethari's expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed interest. "The results in standard scenarios are comparable to other designs," Daniel continued, "but where this approach shows promise is in extreme conditions." He ran a simulation showing quantum particles maintaining entanglement through severe gravitational distortion, something the other designs struggled with. The room grew quiet as the results displayed. When Daniel finished, Professor Nethari studied his design carefully. "Your methodology is unconventional, Mr. Wright, but there appears to be merit in your approach. I look forward to seeing how it develops in the next phase." As Daniel returned to his seat, he noticed Alara watching him with a subtle smile. Even Zixler seemed less dismissive, studying Daniel's results with narrowed eyes. Later that night, as Daniel worked in the laboratory, Alara joined him again. "Your presentation was impressive," she said. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding neural links creating thought patterns." "And?" Daniel asked. "I tried something," Alara admitted. "I temporarily disabled my neural link while reviewing your approach. The experience was disorienting, but I saw connections I hadn't before." Daniel looked at her with surprise. "You turned off your neural link? I didn't know that was possible." "It's not encouraged," Alara said with a small smile. "But I'm beginning to think there might be value in your primitive ways after all." The mid-semester point arrived at the Galactic Academy. The second project milestone loomed ahead, creating a working simulation of their quantum entanglement stabilizer designs. For Daniel, this meant long hours in the simulation lab, typing commands and adjusting variables by hand while other students worked through their neural links. Daniel created a simple AI assistant he named Myra to help with basic calculations. She wasn't as advanced as a neural link, but she freed Daniel to focus on the creative aspects of his work. "Simulation attempt 43 failed," Myra's soft voice announced. "Quantum coherence lost at 4.3 light years." Daniel rubbed his tired eyes. "Still not good enough. We need stability across at least 10 light years to pass this milestone." He scribbled new equations in his notebook, drawing lines between variables that seemed connected. His desk was covered with papers, diagrams, and half-empty cups of coffee. To most alien students, it looked like chaos. To Daniel, it was a physical map of his thinking process. "Interesting approach," said a voice from behind him. Daniel turned to see an older human man with gray hair and kind eyes. Professor Jason Pierce was a visiting lecturer from Earth who specialized in pre-neural link computation methods. "Professor Pierce," Daniel said, quickly standing. "I didn't know anyone was here." "Please sit," Professor Pierce said, examining Daniel's notes with obvious interest. "Your method reminds me of old Earth techniques from before neural interfaces became standard. Messy but often brilliant." Daniel smiled with pride. "That's exactly what I'm trying to do. Neural links are efficient, but they all follow the same logical pathways." "And you believe there's value in the chaotic nature of unaugmented thinking?" "I do," Daniel said firmly. "My approach is to create controlled instability in the quantum alignment. It's unconventional, but I think it might work for longer distances." Professor Pierce nodded thoughtfully. "The standard approach treats quantum particles like perfectly balanced scales. Your approach seems to treat them more like spinning tops," Daniel finished. "They need some wobble to maintain momentum across space." "Fascinating," Professor Pierce said. "Keep at it, Mr. Wright. You may be onto something important." After Professor Pierce left, Daniel returned to his work with renewed energy. He deliberately left his notes and diagrams visible on his desk, a practice that puzzled the alien students who stored all information in their neural links. Several days later, a small group gathered in the main simulation lab. Zixler's team was running a test of their design, with Professor Nethari observing. Daniel stood at the back, watching. "Simulation beginning," announced Thaxos, Zixler's teammate. "Standard conditions established." On the large display screen, 2 quantum particles appeared, connected by a shimmering line representing their entanglement. As the distance between them increased, the connection remained strong. "Excellent stability at 5 light years," Zixler said confidently. "Now introducing standard interference patterns." The simulation added gravitational waves and radiation interference. The entanglement wavered but held. "Impressive," Professor Nethari said. "Now let's try the extreme condition test." The simulation parameters changed, introducing intense gravitational distortion similar to what might be found near a black hole. The entanglement connection began to flicker and then broke completely. "Interesting," Professor Nethari said. Your design performs exceptionally well in standard conditions but fails under extreme stress. This is consistent with other neural link designs we've seen. Zixler frowned. The parameters can be adjusted. The neural consensus suggests strengthening the initial binding phase. Yes, that is the standard correction, Professor Nethari. Agreed. I look forward to seeing if it resolves the issue. After they left, Daniel moved to a terminal and began setting up his own simulation. He didn't notice someone watching him until a voice spoke. "You work strangely," said a stocky alien with copper-colored skin. "I am Lorix from the Centauri system. Daniel Wright, Earth." "I know," Lorix said. "Everyone knows the human who refuses." "Neural enhancement." "But I've been watching your methods with interest." Daniel was surprised. "You have?" "Yes, the neural consensus is powerful but limiting. All minds think along the same paths. It is efficient but predictable." Daniel nodded. "That's exactly what I've been trying to explain. Sometimes you need to explore unusual pathways to find new solutions." "May I observe your simulation?" Lorix asked. "Sure," Daniel said, continuing his work. Daniel's simulation looked different from Zixler's. Instead of forcing the quantum particles into perfect alignment, his design allowed for controlled fluctuations. When the distance between particles increased, the connection stretched but didn't break. "Introducing extreme condition test," Daniel said, adding the same gravitational distortion that had broken Zixler's entanglement. The connection wavered dramatically but then stabilized in a new pattern. The entanglement held across 12 light years. "Remarkable," Lorix said. "The instability actually strengthens the connection under stress." "Exactly," Daniel said excitedly. "It's like the difference between a rigid bridge that breaks in an earthquake and a flexible one that bends but doesn't break." Lorix seemed deep in thought. "The neural consensus would never suggest this approach. It contradicts established quantum theory. Sometimes you need to forget what you know to discover what's possible." Daniel said. Later that evening, Ilara joined Daniel and Lorix in the lab. She had been experimenting more with turning off her neural link. "I've made a discovery," she said. "When I disconnect, I initially feel lost without instant access to information. But after a while, my mind begins making connections it never would with the link active." "That's how unaugmented human thinking works all the time," Daniel explained. "Our brains make strange leaps and connections that don't always follow logical patterns." Their conversation was interrupted when Zixler entered the lab with Krill. They stopped when they saw the three talking together. "Interesting," Zixler said coldly. "Two neural users consorting with the primitive. Have you both malfunctioned?" "We're discussing alternative approaches to quantum theory," Ilara said calmly. "There are no viable alternatives," Zixler replied. "The neural consensus has optimized all possible solutions." "Perhaps the consensus is wrong," Lorix suggested. Zixler's blue skin darkened with anger. "The combined knowledge of 1,000 brilliant minds cannot be wrong where one primitive human is right." After they left, Daniel sighed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble for you too." "No trouble," Lorix said. "I find your approach fascinating. The neural consensus feels increasingly restrictive." That night, Daniel made a breakthrough. By adjusting the parameters of his controlled instability model, he achieved quantum entanglement that remained stable across 20 light-years double. What was required for the milestone? Excited, he left his simulation running and went to get some much-needed sleep. He didn't notice Zixler watching from the doorway, his eyes narrow with jealousy and suspicion. The next morning, Daniel returned to find his simulation corrupted, the data scrambled beyond recovery. Weeks of work, gone. The system logs showed no record of who had accessed his files. "I'm sorry, Daniel," Ilara said when she found him staring at his terminal. "I think I know who did this." Daniel nodded grimly. "So do I, but it doesn't matter. I'll start again, and this time I'll keep backups in places no neural link can access." "Like where?" Lorix asked. Daniel held up his notebook with a small smile. "Sometimes the oldest technology is the most secure. They can't hack paper." The final testing phase for all projects began with just 3 weeks until presentation day. Daniel had worked day and night to rebuild his work after the sabotage. This time, he kept his most important calculations in handwritten notebooks and stored backups of his digital work in multiple locations. His determination had only grown stronger. The main research facility buzzed with activity as teams prepared their quantum stabilizer designs for real-world testing. Daniel watched as Zixler's team ran their simulation for Professor Nethari and several other faculty members. "Our design has been refined based on the neural consensus," Zixler explained proudly. "We've strengthened the initial binding phase and added redundant stabilization protocols." Their simulation showed impressive results. The quantum entanglement held steady across 15 light-years under standard conditions. "Now testing with interference patterns," Thaxos announced. The simulation added various disruptions: radiation, gravitational waves, and electromagnetic interference. The entanglement wavered but held. "Excellent," Professor Nethari said. "Now for the extreme condition test." When they applied the black hole gravitational distortion, the entanglement stretched. Thin but maintained connection. "Success," Zixler declared, shooting a triumphant look at Daniel. "The neural consensus has solved the stability issue." "Very impressive," said a new voice. Admiral Nicole Garcia of the Earth Space Force had arrived to observe the final testing phase. Her uniform bore the insignia of Earth's growing fleet, and her presence signaled the military applications of their work. "Admiral Garcia," Professor Nethari greeted her. "Welcome to our academy. These students are preparing quantum entanglement stabilizers that could revolutionize interstellar communication. Instantaneous communication across vast distances would be invaluable to our fleet," the Admiral said. "I look forward to seeing all the designs." A murmur spread through the room as a young human man entered with Dean Campbell. Unlike Daniel, this human had the telltale neural link device attached to the base of his skull. "Allow me to introduce Ben Miller," Dean Campbell announced. "He has transferred to the Academy mid-semester and will be observing the final phase." Ben smiled confidently at the alien students. "Glad to join you all. I received my neural link last month, the latest Earth-adapted model." Daniel felt all eyes shifting between him and Ben, making the obvious comparison. Here was proof that humans could use neural links, making Daniel's refusal seem even more stubborn and primitive. When it was Daniel's turn to test his design, he approached the simulation station with his tablet and notes. Ben watched with obvious skepticism. "My approach differs from the neural consensus," Daniel explained. "Instead of forcing perfect stability, I've designed a system that adapts to disturbances through controlled instability. Like a ship that rolls with the waves rather than fighting against them," Admiral Garcia observed. "Exactly," Daniel said. Grateful for the understanding. His simulation began, showing quantum particles in his unique alignment. As the distance increased, the entanglement stretched but maintained connection. 15 light-years stable, Daniel noted, matching Zixler's achievement. Adding standard interference patterns, Daniel continued. The simulation showed good results, though not quite as clean as Zixler's design. The connection fluctuated more but never broke. "Now for the extreme condition test," Daniel said. When the black hole distortion was applied, something unexpected happened. Instead of merely surviving the distortion, the entanglement actually strengthened, creating a more robust connection. 20 light-years and holding, Daniel announced. "The gravitational distortion is actually reinforcing the quantum bond." Professor Nethari studied the results carefully. "Fascinating. Your design performs better in chaotic conditions than in stable ones." "That's the key insight," Daniel explained. "Quantum entanglement isn't about forcing particles to behave, it's about working with their natural tendencies under stress." The room fell silent as everyone processed this unexpected result. Even Ben looked impressed. After the testing session, all the data was uploaded to Trell, the Academy's most advanced AI, for analysis. Trell would evaluate all projects before the final presentations. As Daniel packed up his equipment, Admiral Garcia approached him. Mr. Wright, your approach is unorthodox but promising, she said. Earth's military is particularly interested in communication systems that work in extreme conditions near black holes, through nebulae in areas of space where standard technology fails. Thank you, Admiral, Daniel replied. That's exactly the environment where my design works best. I'll be watching your final presentation with great interest, she said before leaving. Daniel noticed Ben Miller speaking with Zixler and Krill, the three of them casting occasional glances his way. Soon after, Ben approached Daniel. So you're the famous human who refuses neural enhancement, Ben said. I was warned about you before I transferred. Warned? Daniel asked. That you might try to convince me to remove my link, Ben said. Some kind of anti-technology crusade. Daniel shook his head. That's not true at all. I have nothing against neural links. I just believe there's value in different approaches to problem solving. The neural consensus is the most efficient path to knowledge, Ben replied, repeating what sounded like a memorized phrase. Why struggle to calculate what the link can provide instantly? Because sometimes the struggle leads to new discoveries, Daniel said. When everything is too easy, we stop exploring alternatives. Ben seemed unconvinced, but Ilara and Lorix joined them before he could respond. Trell has completed the preliminary analysis of all projects, Ilara announced. Daniel, your design was flagged as anomalous because it breaks from established quantum theory. Is that good or bad? Daniel asked. Neither, Lorix explained. It simply means your approach cannot be evaluated by standard metrics. Professor Nathari has assigned a special review committee for your work. Later that evening, Daniel found himself working late in the lab again. He was surprised when Ilara and Lorix arrived together, looking nervous. We need to talk, Ilara said, checking to make sure they were alone. The neural consensus is struggling with the final phase of the project. What do you mean? Daniel asked. All neural link students are hitting the same wall, Lorix explained. Our designs work perfectly in controlled conditions, but fail under unpredictable variables. The neural consensus cannot adapt beyond its programming. And we think we know. Why? Ilara added. We've been experimenting with disconnecting our neural links, and we've realized something important. What? Daniel asked. The neural network doesn't just enhance our thinking, it standardizes it, Lorix said. We all reach the same conclusions because we're all processing information the same way. Exactly what I've been saying, Daniel nodded. We want to understand your methodology, Ilara said. Not just your technical approach, but how you think without the link, how you make those creative leaps. Daniel looked at his two friends, realizing what they were asking. They wanted to learn to think like him, like a human, without enhancement. I'll help you, he said. But you should know that Zixler and Ben are watching me closely. If they find out you're working with me, We know the risk, Lorix said firmly. But some knowledge is worth the price. Daniel smiled and opened his notebook. Then let's begin with the basics of human intuitive thinking. Sometimes you need to forget what you know to discover what's possible. Presentation day arrived at the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences. The grand auditorium was filled with faculty, students, and distinguished visitors from across the galaxy. A row of judges sat at the front, including Professor Nathari, Admiral Garcia, and Dr. Karen Mitchell, a leading quantum physicist known for her skeptical approach to new theories. Earth's diplomatic representative, Alan Young, was also present, along with executives from several galactic corporations interested in recruiting talented students. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation as the final presentations began. Daniel sat in the back row, reviewing his notes one last time. His hands trembled slightly with nervousness. Nearby, Ilara and Lorix gave him encouraging nods. Over the past week, they had spent hours together, with Daniel teaching them how to approach problems without relying on their neural links. Zixler's team presented first, displaying their quantum entanglement stabilizer with confident flair. Our design represents the pinnacle of neural consensus thinking, Zixler declared. By strengthening the initial binding phase and adding redundant stabilization protocols, we've achieved consistent entanglement across 15 light-years under. all standard conditions. Their demonstration showed impressive results, earning approving nods from many in the audience. The other teams followed with similar presentations, all based on variations of the same neural consensus approach. Each showed good results in controlled conditions, but none could exceed the 15 light-year mark in variable environments. Ben Miller presented last among the neural-linked students. As Earth's representative with neural enhancement, I'm proud to demonstrate how human intuition combined with galactic technology creates superior results. His design showed a slight improvement over the others, maintaining entanglement at 16 light-years. The judges seemed impressed, and Ben shot a smug look toward Daniel. Finally, it was Daniel's turn. He walked to the front of the auditorium with his tablet and a stack of handwritten notes. A few snickers came from the neural-linked students as he arranged his papers on the podium. "Mr. Wright," Professor Nathari said, "you may begin." Daniel took a deep breath. "My approach to quantum entanglement differs fundamentally from the neural consensus. Instead of forcing particles into perfect alignment, I've designed a system that embraces controlled instability." He launched his simulation on the main display. The audience watched as his quantum particles formed connections that looked different from the previous presentations, less rigid, more fluid. At standard distances and conditions, my design performs similarly to others, Daniel explained, showing the 15 light-year mark. But the true test comes under extreme conditions. He added the same distortions that had challenged other designs: gravitational waves, radiation fields, and electromagnetic interference. His entanglement wavered but held strong. "Now I'll demonstrate performance near a simulated black hole," Daniel continued. "This represents the most extreme environment for quantum communication." The simulation showed massive gravitational distortion. To everyone's surprise, the entanglement not only survived, but strengthened, extending to 25 light-years, 10 light-years beyond any other design. A murmur of surprise ran through the audience. Dr. Mitchell raised her hand with a skeptical expression. "Mr. Wright, this contradicts established quantum theory," she said. "How do you explain these results?" Daniel nodded respectfully. "Doctor, established quantum theory assumes that stability comes from resistance to change. My research suggests the opposite, that quantum particles naturally seek connection through adaptation rather than rigidity. Can you prove this works beyond simulation?" Admiral Garcia asked. "Yes," Daniel replied confidently. "I've prepared a live demonstration." He connected his tablet to two small devices on opposite sides of the auditorium. "These contain actual quantum particles in the configuration I've designed. One will remain here while the other will be subjected to a variable gravitational field." The test began with real-time measurements displayed on the main screen. As the gravitational field increased in strength, the quantum entanglement held firm. The distance counter showed an equivalent of 25 light-years. "Remarkable," Professor Nathari said, her voice betraying rare emotion. "Mr. Wright, your design functions precisely as your simulation predicted." After all presentations concluded, the judges conferred while the audience waited anxiously. Daniel sat between Ilara and Lorix, all three of them disconnected from the neural network. Ilara and Lorix had removed their links for the presentation. Finally, Professor Nathari stood to address the auditorium. "Before announcing our evaluation, I must reveal something important about this project," she said. "The true purpose was not merely to design a quantum entanglement stabilizer for known space. Our goal was to find solutions that work beyond the frontier, in regions where current technology fails completely." She gestured to the screen, which now showed a map of unexplored space beyond the galactic rim. "The neural consensus has served us well within known parameters," she continued. "But for true exploration, we need approaches that function under unknown conditions. This is why Mr. Wright's design is so significant." Dr. Mitchell stepped forward. "Initial skepticism aside, we've verified Mr. Wright's results. His approach represents a genuine breakthrough in quantum theory." Admiral Garcia nodded in agreement. "Earth Space Force is particularly interested in communication systems that function in extreme environments. Mr. Wright's design opens possibilities we hadn't considered. Professor Nethari turned to Daniel. Mr. Wright, your decision to forego neural enhancement was seen as primitive by many, including some faculty. We now recognize it as your greatest strength, she addressed the entire audience. The neural link creates an echo chamber of thought. While efficient, it can prevent us from seeing alternative approaches. Mr. Wright's human perspective allowed him to question assumptions we had accepted as fact. Daniel felt a surge of pride, but also humility. I couldn't have done this without the Academy's resources and the support of friends who were willing to consider new ideas. He glanced at Alara and Lorix, who smiled back proudly. Zixler stood up suddenly. Professor, are you suggesting we should abandon neural technology, return to primitive methods? Not at all, Professor Nethari replied. I'm suggesting we recognize the value of diversity in thinking. Different approaches lead to different discoveries. After the ceremony, as students and visitors mingled in the atrium, Zixler approached Daniel. Your design was impressive, the Arcturian admitted grudgingly. Perhaps there is merit in your methods after all. Thank you, Daniel said, surprised by the acknowledgement. Nearby, Ilara and Lorix were speaking with Professor Nethari, who seemed intrigued by their decision to disconnect from the neural network. We're establishing a new research group, Ilara explained to Daniel when he joined them. Hybrid thinking, combining neural and non-neural approaches to problem solving. And, we want you to lead it, Lorix added. Daniel was speechless. A year ago, he had arrived as an outsider, mocked for his refusal to use neural enhancement. Now he was being asked to lead a new field of study. Admo Garcia interrupted with her own offer. Earth's Space Force would also value your insights. Mr. Wright, we're establishing a quantum communications division with a focus on extreme environment applications. Daniel's tablet chimed with multiple messages. Job offers from galactic corporations who had witnessed his presentation. Later that evening, Daniel sat alone in his room, writing a message to Dr. Samantha Oliver back on Earth. Dear Dr. Oliver, he wrote, you were right about neural links creating blind spots in thinking. What everyone saw as my weakness turned out to be my strength. The human mind, unaugmented and free to wander where algorithms fear to tread, still has much to offer the galaxy. Sometimes the oldest technology, the human brain, remains the most revolutionary. He looked out his window at the stars and smiled. The journey had just begun.